Welcome to this fourth lesson in our Citizens Constitutional Advocacy Council CCAC 1.0 training series. This is CCAC Lesson 1.4 in this series. John Locke taught us that self-preservation is the first law of nature. So let's start again with the following question. How do we have the ability to practice what John Locke called the first law of nature? We need to call this the first law of human nature. The founder said that self-defense is the first law of human nature. But self-defense isn't just about having and using a weapon. It is also about being organized politically in our communities so that we know what to do as communities when any emergency happens, whether that is an act of God, a human error like a nuclear accident, spilling of a tanker on a highway with a lethal chemical, an ice storm that stops traffic on a major city highway, strands thousands of passengers for days, like happened in Atlanta a year or so ago, or how to respond to something like Hurricane Sandy when it hit the metropolitan New York area. That is why we must start with proper polity. We are in need of correction as the polity, the people organized politically. That is what caucus is about, helping us to figure out how to give people the ability to organize politically from the bottom up in local communities. The strategy is about a progression of action that begins privately, then very quickly moves into the public sector of government, whereby the people are authorized and vested by their state and or local civil government. Again, the first action is and must be learning. Victor Hugo once said, "You cannot stop an idea whose time has come." The Bible says that my people perish for a lack of knowledge. If we act from wrong ideas, we will fail. Ideas have consequences. So we must start by getting our ideas straight with learning, education. Everyone has to get on the same page. Some very smart people have been providing some very good information, whether part of this team that has created this organization, or in other groups, or individuals who have contributed significantly to this effort, even long gone people from prior times and places. People like John Locke, Algernon Sidney, Cicero, William Gladstone, Samuel Rutherford, Aristotle and Plato, Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, and many others. But we have put things together in the caucus that gives us hope. We have hope because we are learning again as true blue Americans. It doesn't matter our political party. This is about all of us in a nonpartisan way. This is a very high-level view to help us understand some very simple things that are the starting point for what we need to do. And to summarize, caucus is about the following. 1, our answer must be when all of the good people put aside our differences and those things that are secondary to pull together under the principles of the Declaration of Independence to all be Americans. As we are reminded with a deliberate but slight adjustment of wording to the Maryland Resolves of July 18, 1774, we read this. As our opposition to the settled plan of the present administration, Congress, and the courts to enslave America will be strengthened by a union of all ranks of Americans across the nation and in every state, we do most earnestly recommend that all former differences about lesser things like religion or politics and all private animosities and quarrels of every kind from henceforth cease and be forever buried in oblivion. And we entreat, we conjure every American citizen by their duty to God, their country, and their posterity cordially to unite in defense of our common rights and liberties, end quote. That the most important and valuable part of the Constitution, upon which its very existence depends, is the fundamental principle of the people's being governed by no laws to which they have not given their consent by representatives freely chosen by themselves, who are affected by the laws they enact equally with their constituents, to whom they are accountable and whose burdens they share, in which consists the safety and happiness of the community. For if this part of the Constitution was taken away or materially altered, the government must degenerate either into an absolute despotic oligarchy or a tyrannical police state, and the freedom of the people be annihilated. It sounds like that was written this morning, but that was written with a very few words to give it modern context in 1774. Number 2. We need to realize that there are things that we need to relearn that we do not currently know much about. Some of these things are critical to our freedom. We might even suggest that some things were intentionally not taught to us because if we as the people were familiar with these things, we wouldn't be in the mess we are today. Could this be possible? Here's an example from President Lincoln's first inaugural address in around the 17th paragraph. He said this, quote, "Descending from these general principles, we find the proposition that in legal contemplation, the Union is perpetual, confirmed by the history of the Union itself. The Union is much older than the Constitution. It was formed, in fact, by the Articles of Association in 1774. It was matured and continued by the Declaration of Independence in 1776. It was further matured, and the faith of all the then 13 states expressly plighted and engaged that it should be perpetual by the Articles of Confederation in 1778. And finally, in 1787, one of the declared objects for ordaining and establishing the Constitution was, quote, to form a more perfect union, end quote, end of quotation. Did you know that the Union was formed, in fact, by the Articles of Association of 1774, according to Lincoln? We were all taught that the birthday of the United States was July 4, 1776. What is that about? 3, we must come together in our local communities from the bottom up in that principle called subsidiarity, which we learned about in the start of this presentation. 4, we must realize that our polity was changed many years ago through a surreptitious subversion that has taken away our vested authority as Americans as, quote, able-bodied citizens, end quote, verbatim in every state laws until 1903, in a way that most of us do not even know that it happened, let alone how it happened. But we know it happened because we are seeing the results today. We have nearly no power. We have almost no authority. We are close to impotent to deal with our problems, and we need to fix this while we still have a little bit of power by which to act before it is too late. 5, we also know that we need to have vested authority. We need to have the ability in our local communities to apply the policing power, to possess enforcement power, to fix our own problems, and not depend on someone else, especially in Washington, D.C., or even in our state capital, to do what we can do ourselves. And 6, we as Americans are strong enough, smart enough, and competent enough to figure out once again, through local popular self-government, popular sovereignty, and popular resistance, restoration, and renewal, how we are completely able and willing and predisposed to govern ourselves. The only thing we need to do is to organize, educate, and discipline ourselves once again to do what we have to do. The good news is we have a well-thought-out organizational plan that involves an identity and rights brief, 8 legal relations brief, CCAC handbook, and other critical tools. We are offering you, your family and friends, and our neighbors together as an invaluable asset to organize our communities into constitutional polity to help save our nation, our culture, and our posterity. This completes the 4th lesson entitled CCAC 1.4. Thank you for listening to this 4th segment as part of our CCAC 1.0 series in our national orientation. Please join us for the next session in this series as we continue to unfold the Citizens Constitutional Advocacy Council story. This is the extraordinary process in which CCAC will successfully provide continuity of government of, by, and for the people. In our next lesson, CCAC 1.5, we will go on to explain further details of how we implement our Citizen Constitutional Advocacy Council. If you realize the necessity of revitalizing constitutional polity at the state and local level, please join this cause by going to www.ccac-us.com and registering on our official website. Take Pre-Quiz 1.0. We then urge you to work through the entire CCAC 1.0 series to understand the continuity of essential information we provide to help us all be on the same page. Then, upon passing the post-quiz with a perfect score, you will be directed on how to take the next step in the process of becoming a member of this vital organization. Please don't shortchange this process. Listen to and study the CCAC 1.0 material carefully. If you have questions or concerns about what you are learning so far, or issues affecting your community, please refer to the links connected to this lesson or contact the person who gave you this information. We extend our best wishes from the Citizens Constitutional Advocacy Council.